Hello, welcome back to my channel where today I'll be making a Popplio cosplay completely from scratch. At this point in my life I have a lot of Pokemon cosplays in my wardrobe, but why not add another one? And for this one I chose Popplio, who is a Gen 7 Pokemon. I really like water Pokemon. I feel like they're really interesting to translate into cosplay because you can make swimwear inspired cosplay. And I've also just been very drawn to the colour blue recently, so it's a perfect fit for me. But I'm going to stop rambling so we can actually get into this. For the design, my main inspiration was clowncore inspired swimwear. So I wanted to have a big clowncore collar with a very short shirt underneath, with a white V down the middle and a pom-pom to represent Popplio's nose, and then a pair of very cute, very frilly swim shorts. They're not going to be real swim shorts, none of it's going to be real swimwear, but I really want it to look like real swimwear. Oh, and I'm also going to be wearing a bodysuit underneath just to make it a little bit more wearable. The first item I made for this cosplay was the little frilly shorts. For these I used a fabric I already had in my stash. It's not the best fabric, it frays really badly, but it's the perfect colour for Popplio, so it seemed pointless to buy a better quality fabric when I had such a good colour match. And I started out by making a very simple pair of shorts using a sewing pattern I made for a previous cosplay project. The fit of this pattern isn't exactly what I'm going for, but I find it easier to make a simple base product and then embellish it, rather than trying to get everything perfect on the first pass. For the waistband, I decided to go with elastic, as this not only gave the top edge a slightly frilled appearance, it also makes the piece look more like swimwear, as swimwear wouldn't have a zip on the front or an elaborate closure system. I always do waistbands in the most awkward way possible, and I make the exact same mistake every time I do them, wherein I sew the elastic into a circle first, rather than just making a channel and feeding the elastic through. I apparently just want to make things slightly harder for myself every single time. As you can see, the shorts ended up really long. I should have thought about this when using this pattern, as those shorts were intended to be a lot longer. They were for my Miku cosplay, so I really should have remembered this and not cut such a big piece of fabric, but it all ended up fine as these strips really came in handy later down the line. But this next step was just cropping them to a height that I liked better, also keeping in mind that I was going to have ruffles on the bottom, which were going to make them slightly longer again. Speaking of the ruffles, it's finally time to make them. For this I started out with the strips of fabric I cut off the legs, cut out 2 more strips of the exact same dimensions, and sewed one leg piece together with one new piece to make a double length strip of fabric. I decided on doubling the circumference as I wanted the ruffles to be obvious without being too overwhelming for me to sew, as the only way I know how to make ruffles is by hand sewing down the strips and pulling the fabric together, and I'm a very slow hand sewer. But once I had the ruffles, I then sewed them flat onto the shorts and the shorts were all done. I think these shorts are so cute and would actually fit really well into my personal wardrobe, as they are bright blue and very clowncore inspired. I also wish they were real swim shorts because that would be so adorable. Maybe I'll make myself a similar pair out of swim fabric so I can wear them to the beach. Moving on now to the t-shirt, this was quite a complicated project for me. I don't really know why. T-shirts are just a little bit awkward, especially when they have sleeves, but we'll get onto that a little bit later on. To start with, I just traced around a t-shirt that I liked the fit of. I wanted it to be a very cropped t-shirt, so I used my most cropped t-shirt that I owned. I did make the mistake of thinking that it was going to fit the exact same as this t-shirt when this is not a stretch fabric. There is no stretch on this blue fabric at all, so you'll see later on I had to fix the neckline a little bit just so I could actually get it over my head. But at this point the project was already going quite well. With the t-shirt all cut out, I moved on to adding in the details to this top, starting out with the white triangle down the front that's going to represent the nose of Popplio. I used some leftover white fabric I cut off at the bottom of a shirt for this, and I flat sewed it down onto the top of the t-shirt. I feel like I could have done this much better, mainly because this fabric frays a lot, so I'm worried it's going to come up eventually, but I'm hoping the collar is going to hide where it's the worst, which is right at the top. But I don't think this would survive the washing machine. I think I'm going to have to hand wash this, unfortunately. But it does look good because it really gives the vibe of the Pokemon, and that's exactly what I'm going for. Moving on to fixing the issue of it not being a stretch t-shirt, I cut a slit in the back and just sewed it into a triangle, and later on I sewed ties into this, just so I could actually get it off and on my body. Moving on now to making this into an actually wearable t-shirt, I started by sewing the shoulders together, and then I sewed in the arms. I didn't want to do it when the piece was all together because I found that really fiddly in the past. This still went quite wrong. I had to redo one of the arms completely because it just didn't like me, but it's much less awkward than trying to stuff it into a little hole and very carefully sewing it around it when my sewing machine isn't quite small enough to do that. This is a much better way of doing it, and it's the more professional way of doing it, so I'm really glad I did that for this project because it really saved me some time, and I feel like the shirt looks a little bit more professional than the ones I've made before. It's definitely not quite there, but it's getting there. To finish the base t-shirt, I then hemmed everything. So I hemmed the ends of the sleeves, the bottom of the t-shirt, and around the collar. I wasn't that fussed about how messy the collar looked because it's going to be completely hidden under the actual clown collar. So while it doesn't look great up there, it does look okay for the purposes of this cosplay. I definitely couldn't wear this t-shirt as a regular t-shirt, like out and about, but it being a cosplay piece, it's not really made for that, so I'm okay with it looking a little bit messy. Oh, and I also tied little ties on the back so I could actually tie up the collar. The final part of this t-shirt was sewing on the pom-pom. I did this by hand because obviously you can't really get it through a machine, and I feel like it's not sewed on absolutely perfectly. It might fall off if I wear this too much, but for now I think it looks cute. And this is the t-shirt all done. I feel like it really evokes the Pokemon quite well, and it's also very much my style. Like, I would wear this if the collar didn't look so weird. I guess I could wear it out and about if I wore the collar piece that I'm going to make next. I just think it looks really cute. It's a very clown core piece. Moving on now to the scalloped collar, this piece is something I've never attempted before because it always seemed like a really difficult thing to do. However, I actually found it quite simple once I got my head around how it worked. I started out by making this pattern piece as I wanted the scallops to all be uniform, and I traced the pattern onto 2 strips of fabric double the length of my neck. I decided not to cut the pieces out at this stage as it was going to make it easier to keep the fabric flat through the sewing process, but I don't believe it would make any difference if you cut them out before sewing it. Next, I very carefully traced along those lines with my sewing machine, taking extra care around the points as to not go back on any lines at all. It really does need to be one single continuous line to come out clean in the end. This was very fiddly for me to do and it took a very long time, but with a little patience it's not too bad of a job, and it's honestly quite relaxing once you actually get into the swing of it. And I was also very happy with the results, so I'm glad I took my time with it and really thought about what I was doing, because every single step of the way I thought I was going to do it wrong, but it actually came out quite good. It just looks complicated, but it's not actually complicated at all. With all the lines all sewn, I then cut off the excess fabric and released the tension at the points. If you don't cut up to the stitches at the points, they will not lay flat or turn inside out correctly. You'll see in the footage I originally just cut slits up to the points, but I did end up cutting out small triangles instead off camera, as the corners were still rather bunched up. Next, I turned the piece the right way out and sewed the top onto the bottom in order to keep everything perfectly flat. I could have ironed it if I wanted a cleaner look with no stitches. I don't have an iron right now and it's a fast borrowing one from a friend. And I also don't mind the look of the stitches, as long as all the stitches are very even, and in this case they pretty much are, so I think it's okay. Now to turn this into an actual collar, I did this with elastic, and for once I did it the correct way and sewed a channel into my fabric first before feeding the elastic through and sewing the ends together. Just a quick note, the dark blue stitches you can see are from my first attempt at sewing in the channel. It didn't occur to me that you'll be able to see the stitches on the final result, so I had to pick them all out and use a white thread instead. The blue just didn't look good. And this is the collar all done. I really like it. It's a little tight, but it's perfectly safe and very easy to take on and off, so I don't think that's much of a problem. I'm very glad I decided to sew the scallops for this, as it really sells the look of a Popplio, which I don't think a regular clown collar would be able to do. The final item of clothing for this cosplay was the bodysuit that's going to go underneath everything, and I know my swimming costume is already the exact right colour for this, but I did want to make everything from scratch just because I think it's really fun to have a cosplay that's fully made by my hands. So yes, while I could make this really easy for myself and just put on a bodysuit that I already own, I decided to make it instead by tracing that same bodysuit. So all I did for this was trace that bodysuit that you saw at the beginning onto the light blue fabric that I used for the collar. This is a two-way stretch fabric. It doesn't stretch that much going lengthwise, but it stretches a lot widthwise, so I knew it would make a really tight-fitting bodysuit that would lay really nicely under all the other clothing. But once I had it all cut out, I then just sewed up the sides and it was all done. And this is the bodysuit all finished. Obviously it's nothing special, but I feel like it really brings the cosplay all together and makes it look like one complete outfit. I decided for this cosplay that instead of doing a wig, I was just going to dye my hair blue. The only issue with that is that my hair really doesn't take blue hair dye very well. I don't know why, so it took 2 rounds of blue hair dye, but I feel like I got it a pretty good colour for a Popplio cosplay, which is great because that saves me so much money on a new wig that I probably wouldn't be able to style anyway. On to the absolute final thing of this project, which is the ears. So Popplio does have ears, so I thought it'd be really good to add them to this cosplay even though they weren't on my original design. And I just decided to make them out the same dark blue fabric as I made everything else, just so it would all match together. And to make them a little bit less flat and a little bit more weighted, I stuffed them with some of the scraps from the light blue fabric, as I don't have any actual stuffing around. And it also means that I'm throwing less fabric away for this project. I then attached them to my head using bobby pins, and I think they look really cute. They go really well with my hair, and I feel like they're really going to draw this cosplay together and make it really obvious that I am a Pokemon and not just a regular clown core outfit. And with that being said, it's finally time to see the result. I'm really happy with how this cosplay turned out and I really hope you liked it too. If you did, please give this video a like down below, comment what other cosplays you might like me to do, and subscribe as I post a new video every single Thursday and I'd love to see you again. But until then, bye!